Hi, everybody. I'm Jennifer McKee of McKee Health Transformations. I'm a certified health coach. I've lost over 50% of my body weight in 15 months, so I've lost 185 pounds, and I help people lose the weight and keep it off for good. And today, I'm very, very happy to have Sam Morris here. He is founder of Telos Lifestyle Coaching. He is a recovered alcoholic, and he is a recovery and personal development coach. So Sam, thank you so much for being here. I am so happy to have you here, like I said. And I just want to know if you could just give us a little bit of information about your story, about everything you've been through with your alcoholism to get you to where you are today, completely transformed.
Okay. First of all, thanks for having me. It's an honor to be here. So, it's funny because every time I think about my story, it always seems to like get a little further back in my development as to when it really started. But I can trace the roots of it to childhood. So a lot of times when you hear about people with alcoholism or drug addiction, anything like that, there's a lot of abuse or alcoholism. They come from an alcoholic household, like a broken home, any of that. I didn't have any of that. I had a really great family, really great childhood, played outside a lot, anything like that. I grew up in Vermont, so it was a lot of outdoor stuff. We only had 2 TV channels, so there wasn't much TV watching going on, just lack of options. But one thing that I did about my childhood that did have a lasting effect on me and did play a role in my alcoholism addiction was that I was very sick as a kid. I had really, really bad asthma and food allergies. So that did a couple things. For one, it made it really hard for me to kind of accept the world and not be afraid of everything because in Vermont growing up or the Northeast or anytime you have like seasonal changes, like drastic seasonal changes, every spring, there would literally be clouds of pollen floating through the air, of just yellow pollen floating through the air in the spring. And for me, that meant that I basically had to stay inside because if I was to go out there and run around or go to a party or anything like that in the spring, very likely I was going to have a pretty severe asthma attack and my lungs would stop working. I would end up in the hospital, which happened regardless every spring until I was about 13 years old. So I had that created a lot of fear in me as far as social situations, just being away from my parents because I felt protected there. And then the food allergies on top of that, I had a really bad allergy to like strawberries, peanuts, eggs, pork. I think that's it. But then there's like legumes, which is beans and all that stuff too. So I had all these food allergies and all this asthma, which it ingrained in me that fear of the world, fear of like eating something wrong, fear of breathing something wrong, fear of something going haywire when I wasn't in a safe environment. But it also made me feel really, really different from all my peers. They were all running around having fun at birthday parties, riding horses, playing with the cows, all the stuff, the stuff you do in Vermont. And I was just this kid that was so scared that I felt so different. And from the breathing and the food allergies, like you're not eating cake, like kids started to pick on me a little bit. And so that again, just layered on with the fear of the social situations and just no desire to socialize at all. So going forward, I avoided birthday parties. I avoided all kinds of parties that I could. I had my mom actually like make calls to the parents, like Sam's not feeling well. And being that I had all these food allergies and this asthma, like it was kind of legit. Like I really wasn't ever feeling well just because I was constantly battling, either like a wheeze or a cough or the sniffles or something was always going on. So it kind of worked out for me in a way. Not that it was fun or anything, but it played into my social anxiety because it just allowed me to separate myself from those social situations and all my friends. And so it just created more of a difference between us. So
Do you think were you ever playing the victim at all? Did you ever have like a point or like, why is it like this for me and nobody else?
Yeah, actually, I did, but it was more like I felt responsible.
Okay.
I felt responsible, like that I was like causing my parents financial hardship and I was causing like all this, like I felt like, I guess it was I didn't identify it as a victim back then, but looking back on it, I felt like a victim. I felt like I had this disease and I had this affliction and it was like, I can't do that because of this. So yeah, looking back on it, I can see how it kind of did develop a little bit of a victim role in me. I think as a kid, you don't know those words and you don't know how to like process the information. But yeah, looking back on it, I probably did have a little bit of that. And then going forward, like when my addiction started to kick in And through there, I did actually end up using my allergies as excuses a lot of times. Just to fast forward just a little bit, I used to, and this is crazy, but I knew that if I ate beans, like it wasn't a terrible reaction, but I would probably have to go to the hospital for it. So if I ever got myself on like the end of a long bender and I was like riddled with fear about like facing the world after a long bender, like calling the parents and being like, hey, sorry, I was missing for a week, or calling a girlfriend, like I would actually go to Taco Bell and get a bean burrito and eat like 3 bites of it. So it would give me enough of a reaction that they would admit me to the hospital for a night, but I could get in there and sober up, and I could have the sympathy of I ate a bean or something like that. So yeah, so I guess yes, officially it did play a victim role for me at some point. You know, as an addict and alcoholic, we can be pretty manipulative when we're in our addiction like that. So that's just one of the things that like the behaviors I used to have. So going back to childhood, so I love sports, but I felt like I couldn't play soccer and I couldn't play basketball. Baseball was easy because there wasn't that much running around. So I wasn't really afraid of having an asthma attack. But again, like I did actually have one of my worst asthma attacks on the baseball field in the middle of a game. I remember I blacked out on the field and woke up in a tent, like ET style, in the hospital.
Wow.
Yeah, that was really scary. So one sport that was really good for me was tennis because, like, again, I didn't have that like feeling of letting a team down, letting my teammates down, and I could run around a little bit and then take a break, and run around a little bit and take a break. And you know, I took to tennis really. I was good at it. I enjoyed it. It was something that I really loved. And like so, from like ages like maybe like 7 or 8, I decided that was going to be my life. Like I was going to play tennis, and so I got really good at tennis, and I played all kinds of tournaments all around New England growing up and through high school and all that. I was ranked #1 in the state of Vermont in high school. And so tennis now had kind of taken the place of, and you'll see there's a pattern to this as I go on, but tennis had taken the place of the allergies and the asthma, because I learned to get a handle on that. I learned to live with the asthma and the food allergies. But now I still had this social anxiety where I didn't want to go to parties. I didn't want to go to any events that like dances in high school, or, you know, we used to have like a lot of parties, like keg parties out in a field. And I just didn't want to go because I just had this massive amounts of social anxiety. So instead of going to those parties on the weekends, I would just travel around New England with my dad, going to tennis tournaments on the weekends. So tennis now replaced that. Tennis was now my built-in excuse for avoiding social situations, which, I mean, I can even look back now and say I had no problem with that because I absolutely loved playing tennis. I still do. Mm-hmm. But I can see now also how it played into my social anxiety. So tennis, in a way, you know, it kind of saved my life in a sense that it didn't allow the anxiety to completely take over and depression to set in and all that. And so I was all through high school, and then I played tennis in college. I played on my tennis team in college for 4 years. And now tennis had, again, looking back, I didn't see this happening at the time, but tennis now, so I had the allergies and the food allergy and the asthma playing a role to kind of keep me from the social anxiety. Then I had tennis to keep me from the social anxiety. And now tennis flipped to be a governor on my drinking. So I always had tennis as a priority. It was always #1 on my priority list. Like if I had a match the next day, I would never drink. If I had practice the next day, I would never drink during the week. I had all these things in place to keep me from drinking. So all through college, I drank like a college kid, I guess. Like I had like the binges on the weekend and the keg parties and all the wild times and stuff like that, but it never got in the way of my tennis or my school. So out of college, I realized I wasn't going to be a professional tennis player. So that career kind of went away, and I got into banking, and now the tennis went away. So now the drinking comes in. So I'm like 23, 24 years old, and I'm living in Charlotte, and right away, pretty much like it was me and 4 other guys, 5 of us total living in a house, and it was the party house, like on the weekends, the late nights, everything like that. So I started doing cocaine a lot, started drinking a lot, and this was like now like a Thursday, Friday, Saturday night thing, pretty much every week. So now that the tennis was gone, I didn't really have any kind of priority. Like the job didn't take priority. The job was like an entry-level bank job, so it didn't take a lot of like brain power or effort to be there. You could go in hungover and do your job, no problem. So, and pretty much everyone else was hungover there too, because we were all like 23, 24, just out of college. Mm-hmm. And so that went on at that level for, I guess, probably like 7 years. So from age 23 to 30. And in that time, I got married, and moved from Charlotte to South Florida. And the marriage didn't work out. It just, we had a life in Charlotte, and then we got to Florida, and a lot of things were different, and we just stopped getting along. And so I left the marriage, and that was when I was about 29. And then I moved down to Miami, and this is when I can actually pinpoint. I always pinpoint. This is when, so if I look back, there was a steady, so those of you listening, there's a steady decline, like falling off of a cliff kind of thing. And it's a slow slide down the cliff at first. But then once I had, the tennis was gone, the wife was gone, I was living in Miami pretty much by myself. I had a roommate, but we both partied and drank all the time. So there was really no like restrictions on my life at all for the first time, pretty much ever. So I didn't have the food allergies anymore that was worrying me. I had control of all the asthma and food allergies. I didn't have tennis to prioritize in my life. I didn't have any relationship to worry about. So I had this like freedom for the first time in my 30 years. And so I didn't do well with that. This is when the alcohol, now it was the alcoholism's turn to kick in. So when I was about 30, so I was talking about sliding down a cliff from age, I guess like I started drinking like regularly when I was about 20, 21, 22 maybe. So from there until age 30, kind of a steady decline, steady slide down a cliff of like a little more partying, maybe getting in a little bit of trouble, but nothing massive, no DUIs, no like jail stays or anything like that. But, looking back, I can see that it was problematic. And so at age 30, the cliff got really steep and I started to go down really quickly, and a lot more cocaine. I was doing commercial real estate in Miami. So that means money, freedom, and it's Miami. So that went on for about 3 years, and I had a girlfriend at the time, but again, we all partied together. It was like every weekend we would do all the same stuff. And then when I was 33, I think the date was like, it was March 14th or March 7th or something like that. And I had been out all night the night before. And this is when people were starting to ask questions now. Like my parents were like, what's going on? Like there's something wrong here. And my girlfriend was like, listen, I like to party too, but you take it to another level. And like people around me, my friends were calling me up and being like, hey, like, I've heard some stories about you and all this. And I'm like, don't worry about it. No big deal. And then it was the morning of that day in March, and I had left my car at a parking deck near the bar I was drinking at, but I left my wallet, or so I thought, in my car. And I called my girlfriend. I was like, hey, can you come pick me up and bring me to my car? This was like 9 a.m. and I hadn't been to sleep yet. And I was looking around the floor of my car for my wallet, and I went through a red light and T-boned another car.
Oh,
yeah.
wow.
So, and my girlfriend, she had taken another street, but she heard the collision, and she's like, and she just got that feeling in her like, oh my gosh, like this is way too close. Like I better go back and check on that. Mm-hmm. So she came back, and sure enough, there I was, like on the sidewalk, and she was an attorney. So she's like, whatever you do, don't blow. They're going to take you to jail, but don't blow into the breathalyzer. So I didn't. I was in jail for 2 nights. Got out, and I pretty much immediately went to my first rehab. But the thing about the rehab is that I had no intention on being sober. I didn't really know what sober meant. I didn't really know that I had a problem. I just thought that, you know what, that's a good idea. Like I can see that it's getting out of hand. And I just never connected all the dots of like being sober, or like all the writing on the wall. Like I got it, like it was just a bad moment. I had a bad moment where I looked away from the road and didn't correlate that it had anything to do with staying up all night and drinking.
Yeah. Yeah.
By the way, my wallet was actually in my apartment, not in my car. Oh, yeah. So that didn't turn out well. So anyways, so I lost my license for that, and that meant I had to stop doing commercial real estate because I didn't have a car, I didn't have any way to get around to properties, anything like that. So no license, no car. And so then I went to that treatment center, and I was there for 28 days. I actually talked my way out 2 days early to go to a wedding with my girlfriend, which I didn't drink at. I actually stayed sober for about 3 weeks just because I was kind of just like in shock about like being sober for 30 days after partying hard for basically 13 years. And I was just like, and you're in enough meetings, you're in enough like AA meetings or process groups or whatever, some of the stuff sticks. So my brain's a little confused at this point, but I know that like I want to be able to have drinks with my girlfriend on the back porch, on the beach, whatever, when we go on vacation. So no intention to stay sober. So I knew eventually I was going to drink. I just waited a few weeks. But when I did drink, I was right back to where the behaviors that I was exhibiting before rehab. I was right back to like the not calling anybody, telling lies to my family. I told a huge lie to my whole family about getting caught with cocaine outside of a nightclub in Miami, which actually never happened. I just needed a bunch of money to go on vacation. So it's really it's terrible. I mean, and this is just like the behaviors that this is what happens to me when I drink and do a lot of drugs. Is that
I just want to
whole,
say something really
yeah,
quickly because you just reminded me of something. So like it kind of reminds me of like binge eating and emotional eating too,
yeah,
because I know that there's been foods that I couldn't control myself around,
hmm,
and like after I lost the weight, I was like, oh, okay, I can control myself around this now, and I would buy the food or whatever, but I couldn't control. I went right back to where I was, like it's what you're saying, and so
yeah,
I realized that there's certain foods I'm never going to be able to control myself around, and I just now
hmm,
accept that.
yeah.
So that's kind of what you reminded me of there. But
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, like there's been a lot. I think there's been a lot of studies that are done between like cocaine addiction and food addiction. The food and the cocaine actually hit the same pleasure centers in the
yeah,
brain when you
yeah,
binge eat and when you do cocaine. So it creates the same sort of like happy feeling in your
mhm,
body. And then, of course, immediately when you're after you've eaten the food and after you've done the cocaine, you're like, oh gosh, like this feels terrible.
yeah,
And then the regret and everything sets in. So then what do you do? Do you eat more? Or do you do more cocaine? Like what? It's a vicious downward cycle.
yeah,
So
yeah.
so I got back from that rehab, drank, and then again same behavior. So my girlfriend was like, you know what? Like I can't stand around and watch you do this to yourself, and I can't let you do this to me. And like we actually talked later on, a few months later, and she said that the last 6 months that we were together was actually some of the darkest time of her life. And that was hard to swallow, but at the same time, like I get it. Like I was not a pleasure to be around. I was not a good boyfriend. I was not a good son. I was not a good brother. Through this whole period, my sister and I actually stopped talking for almost 5 years, and I'll tell you in a second how that's relevant. But these are the type of things. Like I lose girlfriends, I lose family members, I lose the trust of everybody. I stopped getting invited to weddings. I can't hold a job. So
It affects every area of your life.
every single area, like I become useless, completely useless. So after that, after the girlfriend left me and I kept drinking, I went into this deep depression of this heartbreak and depression. And then I just layered on that with just a lot of alcohol and a lot of drugs. And to the point where, like, when I say deep, dark depression, I mean figuratively, like inside of me I was in a deep hole and it was very dark inside of me, but also literally, like my blinds were never drawn. Like I'm sorry, never open.
Hmm.
Like there was no sunlight getting in my apartment at all. So that meant I was either drinking and doing drugs, or I would drink a whole bottle of NyQuil and pass out for 12 hours. I mean, that was my cycle. And that went on for like 3 or 4 months. And finally I was just like, my parents finally convinced me. They were like, you have to go. There's this rehab in Utah. We've gotten you a bed there. Whenever you're ready to go, we need to go. So finally, I don't know what happened, but apparently there was a light clicked in my head briefly. And I was like, okay, I'll go. And basically it was just that I thought that if I went away and got sober and came back to Miami and I happened to run into this girl on the street, we'd lock arms and it'd be happily ever after for us. And so that actually happened. I went away for 2 months. I think it was a little over 2 months. And I came back to Miami and just kind of hopped right back into my life. But I actually stayed sober because I had the intention of getting back together with this girl. And so I did run into her on the street, kind of by accident, kind of by not. I knew where she worked, so I went to lunch down there one day. And I was like, oh, maybe I'll see her. And I
Hmm.
did. And we talked for a little bit, and I was like, I'm back. I'm doing well. Like, you want to like go to see a movie sometime? She's like, no. She's like, that ship sailed. Her exact words were, that ship has sailed. And so I immediately went from like, ouch, that hurts a lot, to immediately relief, because this meant I didn't have to be sober anymore. So literally that day, I went home and parked my car, didn't even go inside my apartment, and walked to a bar and just started drinking. And that went on for 2 years of just like no real consequences, but I didn't have a job. I didn't have anything. I had a couple of relationships here and there, but like, again, it was just a useless existence. Like nothing was happening. My parents were mad at me. Like there was constantly fighting, so much distrust, like all the things that are just bad just went on for another, which is probably like a year and a half. And then I moved back to North Carolina. So finally I said, you know what? I need to get out of Miami, because I realized that things weren't going well. And I realized that but I thought that like where I was in Miami was the problem. I didn't really admit that I was the problem.
Right.
So I know we were talking a little bit about like victim mindset before we
Mhm.
got on the call here. And like,
Mhm.
that was like, I think that was me being a little bit of a victim of like, oh, I'm just a victim of Miami. Like, I just can't handle Miami. Like I didn't take ownership of any of the stuff that I was doing. So I went back to North Carolina where, according to my internal clock or radar or compass, the
Mhm.
last time that my life was okay was when I was in North Carolina, which was college and a little bit after. And so I moved back to North Carolina and I got an apartment right downtown Charlotte, and below me were like bars and restaurants. And so I would go to lunch every day, get drunk. And so this is when things got bad to the point where I knew that like sobriety was probably the best option for me. But also on the other side of that, I didn't want a sober life. Like I was afraid to go on dates sober. I was like, how am I going to go to tailgates sober? How am I going to do all these things that I love to do sober?
Mhm.
Then a psychologist asked me one time, a psychiatrist that I was seeing, a therapist. He said, so Sam, when you go to a football game, are you going for the football game? Or are you going for the drink? I'm like, well, I'm going for the drink. He's like, so the event to you is the drinking, not the football game. I'm like, yeah. He's like, I was kind of like, well, duh, isn't that everybody? And so, so he's like, no, people go to football games, like to watch football games. People go to concerts to like hear music. And I'm like, no, just give me all the drugs and alcohol. Like that's what I'm there for. Like I could care less about the music. I even said that to people. I'm like, I'm not here for the music.
Yeah.
Now, and like, when he said it to me, it all kind of clicked to me, like how big of a deal drinking was to me, like how it it takes over my brain. There's actually studies done on alcoholics and addicts about like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is like food, air, sex, water, all that stuff. When an addict gets a drink or a drug and they ingest it or put it in their body somehow, that drug or the alcohol immediately goes to the top of that list. And I can vouch for this because I would go days without eating, without drinking water, and just all I could think about was like drinking and doing drugs. And it really is like that priority list gets all screwed up when you drink. And then, I mean, not to mention the moral compass goes to haywire too.
Well, you're talking about like going to a football game or something like that. Some people go for the food too, just to eat like
Yeah, I was
crap
gonna say,
food that they have
yeah,
there. And they
yeah,
just get a whole bunch of crap, nachos, hot dogs, like, and they just, totally
yeah,
overeat.
totally. And I'll be honest with you, like when I first stopped drinking, like I would go out and socialize with my friends, and I would just like I would order tons of food and then just overeat, and then get home and just feel like blah. Like
Yeah.
just awful. Like it was all gross food. It was all wings and mozzarella sticks and all this stuff. But like I was there to eat. Like I had switched from being there to drink, and now I'm there to eat because
Hmm.
again, like I wasn't ready to handle these social situations without having some sort of like distraction.
Hmm.
Something to just like be there for a reason other than just being there. So
Right.
that, and then yeah. So let me go back to where I was. So I went to that rehab. And came back 2 years. I moved to North Carolina. So when I got to North Carolina, things got actually worse because I was again like completely by myself, no restrictions on my life at all. So I would go. I got arrested. Like I don't know if you're aware. There's a charge called defrauding the innkeeper, which
No,
is
I've
like,
never heard of
yeah.
that.
So that's when you go to a bar or a restaurant and you try and run out on the tab.
Oh,
So
okay.
I would like, and I don't mean to do it. I didn't mean to do it, but I would just get so drunk that I would like leave a
Right.
beer on the bar and just kind of wander out of the restaurant. They
Mhm.
would catch me and be like, "Were you trying to leave on the tab?" And I'm like, "No, no, no." I'm like, "Okay, whatever." So I got arrested for that, drunk in public. This is all within a matter of like 6 months. So like 3 arrests, and then I fell off a balcony one time, 35 feet. I was tailgating after tailgating all day long, and I fell off the second story of a bar and landed on the pavement below, right next to these
Wow.
people eating dinner. Yeah, I mean, I got really lucky. I mean, I walked out of the hospital like 3 or 4 days later. But in that situation, the story behind that is that my grandmother had a stroke the previous Thursday, and I was scheduled to fly to Vermont on Monday morning to basically say goodbye and do the funeral and all that stuff. My whole family, everyone was flying, and we have family all over the country. Everyone's flying, and this is like the last grandparent of the whole family. And so my mom, it's my mom's mom, and she's in Vermont, and she gets a call on Sunday night that her son has fallen off a balcony and is in the trauma unit. And my uncle told me that like the wail that she let out the screech or whatever, the noise that she let out was like, I mean, her mom just died or is dying, and now her son is on his deathbed too, and she was just like, and that sticks with me a lot. And of course I missed the whole thing. I missed the funeral. I missed saying goodbye to my grandmother, because I was in the trauma unit for 5 days and in the hospital. So that's one of those things that like, this wasn't enough for me to stop drinking either, but it's one of those things that looking back, like it really sticks with me as like guilt, shame, and where like when I think about like maybe alcohol is a good idea again for me sometime, I have to think about that.
Yeah.
Like that's one of those things I think about, like, no, like I very well could have a drink and everything might be fine, but I could also fall off the balcony and miss something really important in my life. So I know that it's just not worth it for me at all.
I think sometimes we just focus on the good parts, like, you know, even with eating, like emotionally, you focus on the pleasure you get in the moment, but you don't remember like how it impacted your life, how terrible you felt afterwards. And that can impact relationships too. So, and lots of things. So yeah, totally makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, it's so crazy how like all the addictions are the same, whether it's like the binging and purging, the binge eating, like whatever it is, like they all have these huge effects on our lives. And like some people look at them all as different, but like when you say addict or alcoholic, it's the same. When you say like addicted to heroin or food, it's the same. Like the heroin addict might be like, oh, but you're only addicted to food. Like, no, like how about you can cut out, how about you don't ever have to do heroin again, but this person still has to eat.
Yeah.
Right? Like
exactly.
It's a huge deal. So I think all these addictions just deserve the massive amounts of respect because they're so powerful. They can literally take over your life. And like for you, for example, like, I mean, just the physical toll that it took on you and the physical toll that drinking took on me, like those are the same. Like,
right. People could just, people can see it sometimes on an alcoholic or a drug addict, depending on, you know, how it affects the skin and weight loss. But with binge eating, I used to get upset and think like everybody can see my problem, you know, because here it is. But I'm like, well, that person could be a liar. That person could be this, but you can't tell by just looking at them. So I used to have this anger about that, that I had to let go. But anyway, I was kind of upset that everybody could see what my problem was.
Out in the open. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So another consequence I had was actually that I gave myself cancer in my mouth twice, oral cancer. And the first time I got it, I didn't really know what was going on because I had never dipped or anything like that. I'd never really had any tobacco products. And so they were like, we don't know what's going on. So I was like, well, I survived cancer. I fell off a balcony. Let's celebrate. Let's party. And so, not sane thinking. But anyways, the second time I got the cancer, they said, like there's been studies that show that like excessive binge drinking can cause oral cancer. So that was the cause of that. And then finally in 2010, so this is now 3 years after my first stint in rehab, I finally said, you know what, I need to stop drinking. Like I don't really have anybody else in my life. I just know that like this is not working out for me. So I went to this rehab in Atlanta for 4 months and got out of there and moved back to South Florida to Delray Beach. And I was there for about 1.5 years. And I would say I was sober about half the time. But again, I didn't want to go to AA. I didn't want to like do all the things that like, I just wanted to live a normal life, but not drink. But it takes work. I didn't want to do the legwork to keep the drinking at bay. So I would drink for 3 or 4 or 5 days, maybe 2 weeks. And then I'd be sober for 60 days. Same thing, 2 weeks, sober for 90 days, 2 weeks, sober for 30 days. And that pattern went on for 1.5 years until I had a really, really bad bender. It went on for a week. And it got to the point where, again, my blinds were all drawn. I was in my apartment and my daily routine was I would go to Wendy's and get 5 Baconators, the big like quadruple stack Baconator. And I'd go to the liquor store and get a bottle of rum and a bottle of Patron. And that would be my day. And I would drink that until whenever, sometimes go out at night, sometimes not. But I did a lot of damage that week to a lot of people in my life. It was just bad. So I woke up one morning and I actually went to an Indian sweat lodge, a Native American sweat lodge. And I sat in there for an hour and did their whole thing. I used to go to them quite often, but this one for some reason I don't know, something happened inside the sweat lodge that like everything became clear to me. And I said, it almost to the point where it freaked me out. Like I got out of the sweat lodge and I was like, oh my God, I have to call all these people and tell them that this is for real this time. Like I'm going to be sober. But I was so freaked out by these feelings that I was like, I'm just going to wait till tomorrow. Mm-hmm. So I was like, if I still feel the same way tomorrow, I'll tell these people what's going on. Mm-hmm. And I did. And so I immediately called up a friend of mine and I said, hey, can you help me go through the steps and get sober and all this stuff. And he did. We got through the steps in like maybe a month, 4 weeks. It was really fast, but wow. I was sober for 11 months. And then at this point I had moved back to North Carolina. So I had this pattern of not really, it's called they're called geographics, where it's kind of no matter where you go, there you are. Mm-hmm. And I have this tendency to think that all around me, the city I'm in, the apartment I'm in, the people I'm with, the weather, all this stuff is like so responsible for how I feel. I have this, I call it cutting and running. So when I get these uncomfortable feelings, I like to cut and run. And so that's why I went from North Carolina to Florida, back to North Carolina, back to Florida. I actually went back to North Carolina before California. So I did all these, I did all these things. And finally, after 11 months, I'd stopped doing all the things that an alcoholic is supposed to do. And I had a buddy from high school in town who was like, hey, you want a beer? Sure. And I saw a window of opportunity because he didn't know any of my struggles. Like we literally hadn't talked since high school. Mm. We knew each other through Facebook, whatever, but he didn't know anything about 3 trips to rehab, all that stuff. So I was like, yeah. And so the first weekend, the worst thing that could ever have happened is that everything went really well. So not really well. I mean, like I went out, I got drunk with my buddy, went home Friday night, woke up Saturday morning, went and drank with him all day, all night. Everything was fine. Sunday morning, woke up, Monday morning, went to work. So I'm like, well, I guess it worked. I guess I'm I'm okay to drink now. And so the next 2 weekends were a progressive, just like drop off a cliff each weekend. The second weekend, I did the same things, but I think I fell down a few times and maybe got kicked out of a bar or something. It was just it was worse than the weekend before. Mm-hmm. And the third weekend, everything was back to the same it was, even worse, actually. I was drinking. I was always the type to drink slowly throughout the night and just drink for like a long time, like a marathoner, I used to like to call it. Mm-hmm. But I turned into this like sprinter where I'd be like, give me 5 shots right now. Boom, boom, boom. So I was drinking in this way that wasn't even like my style. So they talk about how the disease progresses. So like I've been stopped now for 6 years. If I was to pick up a drink now, it would be as bad or if not worse than where I left off, because the disease just it always progresses and progresses. So this is a true example of that, because it was 2 months that I drank. Actually in 2 days, it'll be 6 years. So
that's awesome.
Thank you. Yeah. So for 2 months I drank, and in that 2 months I lost a house. I spent 7 nights in jail. It was for DUI. When I got arrested, my dog was in the car with me. So my dog and me both went to jail. The dog went to the pound. My ex-girlfriend, my ex-girlfriend, who's it was both of our dog. She flew from California to North Carolina to get the dog, so it didn't get adopted, and flew back to California with it. And this was like when I was like maybe 2 days in jail. So I got out of jail and I'm like, can we go get my dog now? And my sister's like, no, your dog's gone. And she's like, Cherie has the dog. So I was like, oh, well, I was thankful that some random family had like someone that the dog knew. So anyways, like that happened. And then that was like exactly halfway through the 2 month period. And I didn't like say I'm going to drink for 2 months and then be done. That wasn't my plan at all. Like I just went off the reservation and drank for 2 months and ruined everything. There was a hospital stay in there, 7 nights in jail, a couple other things. Like my neighbors found me on my front lawn. My house got broken into by my drug dealer. Stole my TV. Like I wasn't there at the time, thank goodness. But I mean, all these things happened. And then finally on November 21st, it was 4 a.m. And I was sitting there with a bottle of rum and a pile of cocaine in front of me. And I was supposed to be moving out of my house at 8 a.m. that day. And this was now 4 a.m. And if you walked into that house, you'd be like, oh, somebody lives here. Nice house. There was nothing packed up. I had spent all the money for the movers on drugs and alcohol. And the only thing that I knew is that I could not face the next day. I didn't even really think about stopping drinking. I just knew that I couldn't do tomorrow. So I called 911 and told them I was having really, really bad thoughts, scary thoughts, and I needed to be taken in. So they did. And then I went to the psych ward there. And then from that, I went to rehab in Michigan, and then I went to rehab in Utah again, same place. And then I did a sober living in Utah, and then I came out here to California. And when I got here to California, the big thing that happened is that instead of going to bars to meet people, I went to the sober AA. I went to AA to meet people, and I met a bunch of guys, and my life fell into place. And I found and it led me everything to where I am right now, and finding my passion and helping other people. It started with personal training, and then on to, like you said, personal development coaching. So that's the story.
Yeah. So I don't know if you want to talk about this or not, but we were going to talk about your sister too. I know.
Yeah. So,
talk about that.
so when I was doing personal training for since 2014, and I love doing it. I love helping people. Like, to see people get results with fitness and nutrition is amazing. But I felt this calling to do something bigger, to help people on a bigger scale. And so I had this thought in my head of being a life coach. And then my therapist who I was seeing, he actually just randomly asked me one day, have you ever thought about being a life coach? And I was like, well, yes. And he's like, and I was like, and I decided right then, I was like, I'm going to do this. And that was in maybe March. And so I immediately started doing all the things to get like certified life coach and all this stuff, and did all that. And then on June 30th this year, actually, I'll tell you about the day, because it was, I remember the morning, I got up and I felt really good. It was a nice warm day here. And I went to get my breakfast, and I cut open an avocado, and I popped it open, and it was like the perfect avocado that like you always see the memes about, like, this is the perfect avocado. And I even put up on Instagram on my story, I said, perfect avocado, this is going to be a great day. And then I just went about my day. And I went over to my girlfriend's house. We were going to go to the beach. I think we were going to the pool or the beach that day.
Mm-hmm.
And right about 11:30 a.m., I got a message on Facebook that from a family friend back in Vermont that why are there tons of cop cars outside your sister's house? What's going on? And so I was like, I have no idea. And so I called my mom immediately and was like, hey, I got a message on Facebook. There's a bunch of cop cars at Amanda's house. And my mom was like, I could tell in her voice, like something was really, really off. And I was like, what's going on? She's like, who sent that message? And I was like, whoever sent, I told her who sent it. And she's like, I was like, why just tell me what's going on? And she said, Amanda died. My sister had died. And so I flew back that night, and the medical examiner determined that she died of chronic alcohol abuse. And I went into her house, and I saw, not to be too graphic, but it was the scene of it was terrible. I mean, there was wine bottles everywhere. There was actually blood on the walls from like, she had all the alcohol she was drinking had caused her gastrointestinal hemorrhaging. So she was like really like coughing up blood. And so I decided in that moment that I was no longer going to be a life coach. I was going to help people get through what I went through. And I knew that my life went to complete hell. Like I needed the rehabs, and and I spent 7 nights in jail, and I lost my dog, and I fell off balconies, and I got cancer and all this stuff. Like I paid all the consequences that one could pay, except I didn't pay the one that my sister paid, which is death. And I decided right then that, there's a way to save people from getting to, even to the point that I got to. You don't even need to get there, much less where my sister got with it. So I immediately shifted my focus and decided that I was going to be a recovery coach. And I developed a program to help people get sober, to help people, because it's a slope that you're going down. It's slippery, and you don't even see it until it's too late. And it was too late for my sister, and it was almost too late for me. But I was able to climb back up the hill, and I need to help people. I feel like I need to help. My purpose on this earth is to help people to climb back up that hill, because you don't have to let it get to death. And so, yeah, that's kind of that's how I got to exactly where I am today.
I love that, because that's kind of like how I felt after I'd lost like 80 pounds. So I still had more than 100 pounds to lose, but I knew I was going to get there. And I was like, I found my true life purpose, which is to be a health coach, because I have to pay this forward. I was stuck for so many years, and I felt like now I know how to help people. And so, I know exactly what you mean.
Well, yeah. I mean, and then the people like you and I who have been through that, like, that's why I call my podcast Through the Fires.
Mhm.
After
Which I forgot to mention, by the way, so you got to
oh, no,
talk about that.
it's okay. I got it from a Charles Bukowski quote.
Okay.
What
Yep.
I think how it goes is what really matters is what matters most is how well you walk through the fires. And so my point is that, like, people like you and I who have actually walked through the fires are the best people to teach other people how to do it. Like, you can go to, like, I mean, a fitness coach, or I can go to, like, a therapist. And if that therapist, like, hasn't actually dealt with addiction themselves, it's going to be really hard for me to listen to them, as far as, like, and I went through this. I went to several therapists, like specialized therapists, like addiction specialty therapists that haven't been through addiction. Like, they've read every book and know everything, but they haven't been through it. They haven't walked it. And so people like you and I that have walked it are the people that, like, this is why we walk. This is why, like, our pain defined our purpose.
Yeah, I mean, it was similar for me because, like, when I was like really feeling like no control over my binge eating, I went to these many different people for help, and they had never been through it. So they were telling me, "Oh, just eat 100% clean," and I'm like, you can't go from binge eating to 100% clean and be
Like, you don't.
successful. And so I'd fail. And then I thought I was a failure. And then I thought I couldn't do it. And so then I would just binge eat more and, like, beat myself up. So it's about, I think, well, in the case of that, it's like small changes, but a lot of mindset work, which is what you also teach.
Yes, absolutely.
Similar mindset stuff.
Yeah. I love talking about, like, how we've both walked through the fires, because it's like, from speaking of the people that we help, like, for them to hear it from someone like us, like, our message, like, we're both, like, I call it recovering out loud. Like, you and I are both recovering out loud so that we can help other people to recover in silence. If that's how they choose. Like, that's my thing, is, like, if you don't, like, alcoholism is, like, a big stigma. Like, there's a huge stigmas against it. There's a stigma against people, like, that, and there's a stigma against the binge eating too. Like, people think it's not that, like, why don't you just stop eating it, right? And, like, it's just not that easy. So with alcoholism, there's, like, my life will be over if I stop drinking. How am I going to do this if I stop drinking? And then also, alcoholism has, like, this, like, it's like same with binge eating and food addiction. It's like, oh, you made a choice to drink. You made a choice to keep eating those cookies. Like, you made a choice to keep drinking. Like, no, not really.
Yeah.
Like, once you get the first one in you, it's over, and it's so.
Yeah, you can't just, like, if you can't, like, for me, it was pizza. So it wasn't, I couldn't just eat one piece of pizza. Like,
No.
because I thought maybe I could try, but every single time I tried, I failed. Like,
Yeah, I know. It's so powerful. So I think that having people that want to go, that are struggling with it, hear us talk about it, and, like, the things we actually experience, it has a much bigger impact than to go to a therapist and be like, well, the book says,
Yeah. It helps when they've been through it, for sure.
Yeah.
Totally agree. Yeah.
And I'm sorry, I forgot the question. You asked me a question.
Oh, nope.
The podcast?
I think you answered it. Yeah, I wanted you to just, so your podcast is called Through the Fires. And
Yeah.
So do you want to talk a little bit more about what that is? And
yeah, sure. I'd love to. So you were my first guest. Thank you for that.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. What a way to kick it off. So the thing behind the podcast, my purpose in starting the podcast is not to speak directly to people recovering from alcoholism or have been through that, but I want to tell comeback stories like yours, and I want, like, mine, and I want to tell other comeback stories, whether it's not, like, I had a friend of mine who's a personal trainer, and his accountant stole, like, $50,000 from him. So, like, that kind of like any kind of time that people have been put up against the wall, or their feet are to the fire, like, that's when people find out what they're truly made of. Like, that's when people find out, like, you can think, like, you're super successful at business, like, you're super successful at real estate or whatever it is. But if something can knock you off your horse so quickly, and what happens next is the absolute best thing that human beings have about them, is that we have this ability to, like, without thinking and without any kind of, just literally no thought at all. Like, when I stopped drinking, my thought was not, I'm going to stop drinking forever. My thought was, like, shit, I need to get out. I need to get away from the walk. I need to get through this fire. Like, this is hot right now. And I need to do something. I need to do whatever I can to get through it. And it looked like going to rehabs and not drinking ever again. But the thing about it is that it was a fight or flight. And so when humans are, like, when you're put in that position where you had all the foot pain and all that stuff, and, like, all the mental stuff that you went through, like, got to the point where you were, like, right there looking at like the literal fork in the road. Like I'm either going to continue on this painful life, or I'm going to do something about this and come out the other side just like shot out of a cannon. And you did that. Like you're helping other people now. And like my podcast is dedicated to anybody that's got a story like that, whether it's losing a parent when they were young, or like an athlete that's had a severe leg injury and come back to excel at their sport. Like any kind of comeback story, inspirational story, where they found that motivation, the steps they took to get through the fire. I just want to tell those stories. And I love them so much that like, I just want the rest of the world to hear them. So I want to provide, a vehicle for those stories to get out there.
Yeah, and it's so inspiring and motivating, because when we're in that place where we're at that crossroads, we're not really sure we can do what we know we need to do.
Nope.
Like I didn't know I could do, but I just knew that I couldn't keep doing what I was doing. That I knew for sure.
Yep.
Now, how I was going to get to where I wanted to be, no clue. But I just knew that I had to die trying getting to where I needed to be. And so I was willing to just.
And you talk about like small little changes. Like that's what it takes. It literally takes one foot in front of the other. Like I'm not even talking about like a figuratively one foot. Like it comes down to minute sometimes.
Yes.
Like what am I going to do when I wake up? Okay, what am I going to do when my feet hit the floor? Am I going to get in the shower? Am I going to reach for the bottle? Like what am I going to reach for the pizza? Like what am I going to do every second? Like, and then of course it grows where you establish a lifestyle, but it starts with, I mean, everyone says one day at a time, but that's one day seems like a huge deal. Sometimes it's more like, how about the next 10 minutes?
Yeah, that's what I tell people. That's what I had to do too. Some people go to fast food every morning for breakfast or something. Yeah. I was doing that like a lot, like not every day, but a lot of days. And so sometimes it was really hard for me like to break that habit, but I just had to remind myself of my why.
Yes.
Like why I couldn't keep living my life the way that I was. And I had to also remind myself of the small changes or goals that I had committed to.
Yep.
And remind myself I wasn't trying to change everything overnight, because that wasn't going to work. That's like way too overwhelming. But so it's yeah, I like that, we're kind of on the same page there, and it totally works. But it is, you got to take it sometimes minute to minute. Just make it through that.
Yeah. And then another big thing that helps, that helped me, like I was talking about how, like, when I think about having a drink, it goes to like the romanticizing of it, like the fun that I had on the beach that one day. It doesn't
out of the whole thing, like
out of 13 years, that one day that was awesome. That's how it's going to be again. Like, no, the numbers are not in your favor, buddy.
Right. So yeah, we have to remind ourselves of that. Yeah,
just play the tape forward. Like, what has history shown? Like, take the facts into consideration. What is likely to happen here? What's like, okay, I'll have one drink, or I'll eat one piece of pizza. That was good. It went pretty well. Let's have another. And then after that,
the whole pizza's gone.
Yeah, right, exactly.
I like when you say that, play the tape forward. And then, is it called Take Action Tuesday?
Yeah.
You do on
Take
your
Action Tuesday. Yeah. So my podcast, it has 2 episodes a week. One is one of the inspirational comeback stories I was talking about. And the other one is where I just kind of rant about like something really, literally, like it's like maybe 10 minutes, 15 minutes tops, about something about life, that taking action. So everyone always ties taking action to Monday, or January 1st, or the first of the month. Like, okay, I'm going to start Monday. And the fact of the matter is like the change, like it doesn't matter. Like, especially with drinking, like if you say you're going to start Monday and it's Thursday, that weekend could be the weekend you fall off a balcony and miss your grandmother's funeral. That weekend could be the weekend that you wrap your car around a telephone pole. Like you never know. And like, I mean, like eating, like if you say I'm going to have one more crazy weekend of eating, that could be the weekend that your arteries fail and you have a heart attack. That could be the weekend that something really bad happens. So if you need to change something, it doesn't have to be Monday. So I just picked Tuesday because it's the day after Monday. And like, just to make the point of, you can do it anytime. Like, and the people that, I've never seen a stat, but I guarantee it's heavily outweighed the people that don't actually do that on Monday than the people that say they're going to do it Monday. So you know what? You can still do it on Tuesday. You don't have to wait till the next Monday. So the whole thing behind Take Action Tuesday is that change doesn't have a calendar. You have a calendar. Change does not. So whenever you get to the point where you need to change, there is no such thing as one last one. I always say it's like sex with your ex. There's no one last time. It never, ever works. And just like eating and drinking and whatever else you're addicted to, there is no one last. It's famous last words. It's never going to be one last. The last one is the one you had yesterday.
Yeah, we tell ourselves that all the time too.
I know. I
Like,
do it. I'm guilty of it.
I
I'm
need to do
guilty
it
of
so
it.
I can start tomorrow. Like, it's
Yep.
so true. It's so
Yep.
true. I
Yep.
like that though, what you say, because I mean, that's what people think. Like, I'll start Monday, but I say, like, life is short. You don't know if you have until Monday, really.
Exactly.
Like, all you know is you have right now, and you have to
Mhm.
live in the present, and you have to make changes. I mean, take action now. And yes, that
Yeah.
will impact your future, but all we know for sure is we have right now. So why wait?
Yeah,
You
absolutely.
know?
That's it.
So
Well said.
yeah, so great. So I just have one last question for you. If
Yes.
you could just give, I know you've already given some tips, but if you want to summarize some of the stuff you've already said or say
Mhm.
something new, but just like 4 tips to somebody who's trying to get sober, like what would be your top 4 tips
Well, the
getting
first
started?
thing, yeah, the first thing is you have to ask for help. You really have to. The voices in your head are not going to help you on this one. And so you have to call somebody, whether it's a good friend, whether it's a family member, whether it's someone you know that's already sober. Just call them and get honest with them. So that leads me to the second point, is getting honest. You have to get honest with yourself. You have to really look at what's going on with you. Because I know from experience that, like, I may not want to admit it, but from the first time I ever drank, something felt wrong about it. Like, it wasn't, I didn't have so they say it's like an allergy. Like, you could say you have an allergy. So I used to struggle with, I have an allergy to alcohol, because I define allergy as like eating a peanut and dying. Like, an alcohol never, if I drank alcohol, my throat wasn't going to close up and die. And I looked up a definition of an allergy. It's an abnormal reaction. So that means an abnormal physical reaction or an abnormal emotional reaction. And that's what I had with alcohol. Was look at how you react to alcohol. How do you feel hungover the next day? And I mean, like, not just like dehydrated and tired and a headache. Like, do you feel like your soul is hungover? Like, look at that. Look how you feel about your behavior, and look at the behaviors that happen when you're drinking. Do you become Jekyll and Hyde? Because if you become Jekyll and Hyde, that's not everybody. Everybody doesn't become Jekyll and Hyde when they drink. Alcoholics do become Jekyll and Hyde. The complete shift, like the complete opposite behaviors of what you normally do, like lying. Like, I became the big liar, the manipulator, the cheat, the thief, whatever. Bad boyfriend. Like, that's not me. It never was me. But when I drink, that's who I become.
Mm-hmm.
So look at your behaviors when you drink. And then as far as when you've done all that, when you've gotten to the point where you're committed and you become willing to do the work, one huge thing that I've learned pretty recently in the past couple of years is use visualization. It's so huge. And with visualization, I mean, it's I can break it down very simply for you. What you do is you create a statement that a goal that you want has already been achieved. So say you wanted to get through the holidays without drinking. So you say something like, I'm so happy that it's January 1st and I got through the holidays without drinking. And put yourself now on January 1st or 2nd or whatever, after the new year, and imagine how it feels. Close your eyes, take some deep breaths. Imagine how it feels to have already accomplished that, to already have been through the holidays without drinking, and sit with that feeling for maybe like 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 2 times a day or so, and just do that repeatedly, and it'll work wonders.
I use visualization a lot too for my
Yeah.
clients too, just,
It's
but it works for so many different things, and it's so
Mhm.
important. It's so important. I like too when you say play the tape forward. That's so important as well.
Mhm.
Try to remind yourself of what the consequences most likely will be.
Yeah, and just know that, like, if you don't have control over something, it has control over you, and that's not a good thing. And you need to, like, the more you hold on and try to control it, the less control you're going to have.
So true. So true. And sometimes it's hard to admit we don't have control over something,
Yeah.
That's like I think one of the hardest things.
Totally.
It's kind of freeing though when you do.
It's completely freeing. Like, really good things happen when you stop fighting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. So why don't you tell viewers how they can contact you if they're interested in coaching
definitely.
or your podcast?
Yep. So my coaching website is Telos Lifestyle.com. It's TELOS lifestyle.com. I'm on Instagram at Telos Lifestyle. And then you can look at my personal Facebook page, Sam Morris. And those are probably 3 good ways to get a hold of me.
And the podcast is on iTunes.
Yes. Podcasts on iTunes, Spotify, Google, all the Stitcher, tune in, and that's Through the Fires.
Okay, Through the Fires. And if anybody's interested in health coaching, you can go to my website at McKeeHealth.com. And yeah, thank you so much, Sam. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you.
Jennifer,
So
thank you so
inspiring.
much for having me. Great to see you. Great to see you again.
Great to see you too. Take care.
All right. Talk soon.